Thank you all for joining us today for harnessing the power of AI in higher education. My name is Diana Barbu. I'm the Senior Director of Research at MSCHE. And now I want to welcome our speaker, Dr. Trisha Beltram-Gallant, who's the Director of Academic Integrity Office and Triton Testing Center at the University of California, San Diego. I'm going to turn it over to her to tell us more about her background and begin today's presentation. Trisha, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Diana. Welcome, everybody. We are going to be talking today about the power and maybe the challenges as well of artificial intelligence in higher education. And I purposely on the title slide just said AI. I do want to note that the AI that came first is academic integrity. It existed long before artificial intelligence. And so I left it as the power of AI because there's the power both, of course, of academic integrity and artificial intelligence in higher education. And sometimes they go together and sometimes they don't. And so we'll talk a little bit about that today. And when you see graphics in my slide that look like the one on the title page, you'll probably already guess that it was generated by artificial intelligence. I tend to use ChatGPT 4 because it has a DALL-E 3 connection, and you can iterate back and forth to try and get the image that you'd like. So if you see images like that, they are mostly done through ChatGPT 4 with the DALL-E 3 integration. So what are we going to do today? We're going to get on the same page about the educational promise that Gen AI has potentially disrupted or will disrupt or will continue to disrupt. Explore how we can harness the Gen AI power to positively disrupt teaching, learning, and assessment, and therefore accreditation. And then consider the barriers for harnessing that power and some of the solutions for potentially breaking through those barriers. Now, where am I on this journey? I'm joining you in this journey, but where am I coming from? As Diana mentioned, I'm the director of two rather unique units in a university setting, and definitely unique that I'm the director of both. The Academic Integrity Office was one of the first in the nation, and it came into being, I guess, in 2006 when I was hired. But more recently, in the last 2 years, I also became the director of our testing center. And a lot of you will have testing centers on your campuses, not always for academic tests, a lot for placement tests or third-party vendor tests. A lot of you will not have an academic integrity office, and I don't think there is another one that has both. So my journey has been as an academic integrity practitioner, author, researcher. I started this journey in 2002 in terms of academic integrity. So it's been a fruitful, long journey. In 2008, my book came out, Academic Integrity in the 21st Century, where I really argued that we needed to move on from looking at cheating as a conduct issue and looking at it as a teaching and learning issue. And one of my most favorite sayings from that book is, we're still teaching as if it's the 20th century and the internet doesn't exist. Remember, this was 2008. And now I would say we're still teaching as if it's the 20th century and AI doesn't exist for the most part, given a few exceptions, but we're going to talk about that. My most recent book before Gen AI was this compendium. And if you've not read anything about academic integrity, I suggest this book because we cover 30 years of research in the area. And then, so that was my life. And then November 22 happened. And we all know what happened in November 22. OpenAI decided to unleash on all of us without our knowledge, without our permission, without our desire, without our wants, ChatGPT. And that turned my office, the Academic Integrity Office, into the receiver of this from faculty, and not just in my institution, but of course, all over the place. Now, interestingly enough, I had warned faculty prior to this point that this was coming, but it wasn't until ChatGPT was released that people really started to pay attention. And as you know, what that panic was is students are going to cheat. Students are going to cheat. Our assessments are over. Let's give up writing. Let's give up essays. The essay's dead. You've all seen the headlines. Perhaps you've all said some of these things. but it was I mean, I don't think the panic was unfounded. I think it was legitimate panic that once again, higher education and education writ large is being forced to adapt to an external situation not of our own making, just like the pandemic. And we have barely gotten out of the pandemic and remote instruction, which we were forced to do if we weren't already in online institutions, which some of us were. And it just seemed like a lot. So I had to start moving quickly to figure out how I could help faculty at my school and faculty around the nation, and of course help the students too. And the way I do that is I start to write. And so if you're not familiar with the International Center for Academic Integrity, I recommend that you subscribe to their Integrity Matters blog. And so I just started writing for them, and I wrote and I wrote and I read and I wrote some more. And in April of 23, I organized a week-long virtual symposium at UCSD that was open to everybody. And in fact, you could still look at those recordings if you wanted, where we were talking about the threats and opportunities of artificial intelligence and contract cheating. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that too. And now coming out next year is a book that my colleague and I have with the Jim Lang's series in the University of Oklahoma Press. And so we're excited for that to come out, where it's not just about Gen AI, but it is basically giving faculty, instructional designers, people that support teaching, learning, and assessment, the reasons why people cheat or cognitively offload, and what we can do with them, what we can do about that, regardless of the external forces or in context of the outside forces, whether it's Gen AI or the next thing that comes along to disrupt us. So now I want to do a little poll to find out where you are in the journey. So let me start that poll. And I just have 2 questions in there. And can you see the poll, Diana? Can you put your thumbs up if it, perfect, thank you. So the first question is, look at that emotion wheel on there and choose 1 to 3 words to describe how you feel currently about the impact of Gen AI on higher education. And I'm talking about generative artificial intelligence in general, because we've been using artificial intelligence for a while in the back end in higher education, predictive analytics. But really, we're talking about these chatbots, right? ChatGPT, Bing Chat, Google Gemini, so on. So some of the feels that you're feeling about this. And then also where you are on your journey with Gen AI. Are you a novice? You haven't even touched the tools yet. Are you an advanced beginner and you've played with them and you're just know enough to be dangerous? You feel pretty competent, you use them regularly, or you're an expert. You use them regularly for your own work and you're already incorporating them into your classrooms and teaching students how to use them. So we got people responding. So I'll keep the poll open for a little bit longer because the responses are coming in fast and furious. We're at 27% or 30% participation, so we're already over our normal participation rates for social science surveys, so that's good. We used to say you had to get at least 25% response rate for it to be a valid survey, and now we're lucky if we get 10%, I think, for a lot of surveys, unfortunately. Hard to make data-driven decisions when we can't get the data. Let's see. Interesting. A lot of you skipped the first one, the feel the feels one. More people have answered the second question.
Trisha, it seems that the words on the graphic are a little bit too small. Do you have any guidance?
Well, choose any word you want. You don't have to choose a word from the wheel. I mean, they go from anger and disgust to joy and exhilaration and love and appreciation and sadness and despair. And so choose whatever word you want. You don't have to choose them from the emotion wheel. Yeah, they're unfortunately a little hard to read. Zoom poll started letting us use images, but they're not great, obviously. All right, looks like responses have slowed down, so I'm going to end the poll and I'm going to share the results. So about about 47% of you say you're advanced beginners, so you've played with the tools. 4% say you're an expert. So there's 8 people in the audience that Diana, you all should get the list of names for, and then we can then you can reach out to them and ask them for to help their colleagues out in the area. Competent 23% and novice about a quarter have not played with the tools. And I can't even see what the feels are on the feelings, actually. So I'll have to figure out how to do that. We can share them later. Okay, thank you for that. So it's good to know where people are in the audience about their journey. So we're all over the place, right? Like this is something, it's not like we're getting paid to do this. I don't know about you, but I'm learning about this in spare hours, early mornings, weekends. And so it makes sense that we're all at different phases of learning about this. So let's get us on the same page to start our journey forward from this moment in time together. And to do that, I want to remind us all of our educational promise. So we have a social contract with society, higher education institutions do, right? We promise society that we are going to develop and certify knowledge and abilities, right? We often talk in higher education about education. We're educators, and we're certifiers. People can learn all over the place. They don't need us to learn. Oh, did I say that out loud? They don't necessarily need us to learn. There's so many places that people can learn things now, right? They need us for the certification, along with a whole bunch of other stuff we do around the classroom experience. And so we must not forget that certification piece. It's extremely important, and we often don't want to talk about it, but that's essentially why we exist, and that's why we get accredited, so that we can certify people. We wouldn't be able to certify people if we weren't accredited, or nobody would take us seriously. And I would argue, hopefully, our social contract with society is we're developing the next generation of ethical citizens and professionals. We don't need more chemists, lawyers, accountants, doctors, engineers, whatever. We need more ethical accountants, lawyers, doctors, engineers, all types of citizens and professionals, not only for our employers, the employers that hire our graduates, but for our democracy, right? And so what I'm enjoying seeing is more and more people talking about ethics as a result of Gen AI coming in. So this is our promise that we make to society. And now there's a lot of things that have to happen and for that certification to happen, right? And when there's a lot of things that have to happen to get that output, then there's a lot of things that can go wrong along the way. And I'm not going to talk about everything that has to happen to get to that certification. I'm going to focus us in on a very narrow part of what we do for certification. So the social contract that we have requires us to do several things. So first, instructors have to design fair and honest pedagogy and assessments, right? They have to decide what students are going to learn. They have to decide how they're going to teach them, and then they have to decide how they're going to evaluate that learning. Then students have to fairly and honestly demonstrate that learning. They have to say, this is what I know and what I can do at this point in time. In return, instructors fairly and honestly evaluate student learning. And all of those fair and honest assessments add up for the institution to say, we guarantee that this student has CBA level knowledge, mastery level knowledge in this particular discipline, right? Is mostly what we say. Now, of course, there's a whole bunch of assumed skills that our graduates have and assumed knowledge that our graduates have as well that isn't necessarily transparent. Critical thinking, interpersonal skills, collaboration skills, empathy, right? There's a whole bunch of other stuff that people assume university and college graduates have. So if anything goes wrong in this, moral obligation supply chain, I call it, then our certifications will lose value, our institutions lose the trust of society, and the social contract breaks down. Okay, so what can go wrong in that process tons of things. And one of them might be generative AI. So just to make sure we're all on the same page here, I'm sure you all know what this is, but when I'm talking about generative AI, I'm talking about machines that take input and generate output. And these are predictive machines. They are not thinking, they are not reasoning, they are not understanding, they are not critical, they don't think, right? They're producing the next best word in the sentence, given the context and given the preceding words. So if I said to you, it's sunny today, the sky is blank, you're going to say blue or clear or bright. You're not going to say cloudy, dark, gray, right? That's what the machine does as well. So it's original in the sense that it's not just plagiarizing exact words from one source, but it's plagiarizing. Like, let's not, as I guess we might say that we do. It was trained on these models, these large language models mostly, if we're talking about language and not image. They're trained on somewhat unknown corpus of data. Basically, they scrubbed the internet and took things without permission, and problematically even took things from non-legitimate sources like Reddit. So if you think about all the mis and disinformation that's on the internet, that is part of what these systems were trained on. And then now you know why it's full of bias, because the humans that wrote the stuff that it's trained on were biased. And our society has been biased. So when we talk about LLMs being biased, and I keep seeing people saying that, like, oh, these machines are biased and that's horrible. It seems to me to miss a bit of nuance. They're only reflecting back to us our own biases. And they're reflecting the most likely result. So if you think about, the big fuss was over, draw me a picture of a doctor, and it would default to a white male. But it's a predictive machine. And in the history of medicine, at least in America, for example, the majority of doctors were what? They were white men, right? So it's not that the machine is choosing to be biased. It's just saying, based on the data I have, the most likely next best predictive word or image in this request is a white male. And so that's how it is biased. But we have to be careful when we're talking about them not to, presume that they are biased in the same way we are in terms of thinking about it or choosing it. Not that we always choose it either. They were not trained to discern fact from fiction. This is what you hear about from the hallucination problem. They hallucinate. It's not really that they're hallucinating. They just don't know what's true, or they don't think. They don't reason, they don't comprehend, they don't feel. And the problem with that is every update they've been giving us. I don't know if any of you have used the apps on the phone where you can talk to it versus, chatting with it in text. They're sounding, and with the updates to ChatGPT 4.0 that just came out yesterday, they're making them sound and feel more and more human. And that is something we should all be very worried about and very concerned about. And so here we have, again, a company telling us, an external force basically telling us in education, just embrace it. You have no choice. The students are using anyways. And of course they want students to use it, because if students use it now, they're going to use it in their career, and this builds their pipeline. And so this was just thrown at us. And it caused a disruption, right? Because as you can see in this video, it's super easy for a student to just give it the prompt to a paper that they were given by their professor and just have the machine start to write the paper for them. And then we get these arguments about, well, maybe that's just the way people will write in the future, and we should just train students to do that, and then we can teach them how to revise and revise and edit. Well, maybe, but maybe also that if we only do that, we're depriving the students of developing the knowledge and skills that they need to expertly edit and revise the output from these machines. So we really have to think about what impact this offloading to machines will do to students, will do to society in terms of what skills will be lost. Maybe some skills can be lost and it's okay. Like no one seems to care anymore that most of us can't format our references according to MLA or APA anymore because machines can do that. So there might be some skills we very much don't care if nobody learns anymore, but there might be some that do matter. So we have to think about this and keep in mind, cognitive offloading is not new, right? Human beings have been doing this forever. You do it every day. You have cell phone numbers in your phone, so you don't have to memorize them anymore. You have your grocery store list, so you don't have to keep it in your brain about what you need to pick up after work at the grocery store. We all cognitively offload. Students have been doing it for their academic work for years as well. Google Translate. Not always cheating, right? But it's there to cognitively offload. Getting exam questions or answers from friends. Do you remember the old fraternity or sorority files? If you've been around the block for a little bit, where people shared these things, right? Using a calculator. Sometimes that still is cheating, but remember when it came out in the 20th century, people, math professors probably freaked out a little bit. Using spelling and grammar checks. We used to grade for that in higher education, and we really don't much anymore because, you know, it's being done by a machine. Using Cliff or Sparks notes. I was surprised to find out Sparks notes still exists. I thought they would be out of business with ChatGPT, but it actually still exists. Why read the book when you can just read the Cliff notes? Now you can just ask ChatGPT to summarize. And then getting other humans to do the work, which is what we call contract cheating. That is $1 billion+ industry. We in America are very reticent to acknowledge this and admit it. In Ireland, United Kingdom, or sorry, I should say Britain, Ireland, Britain, New Zealand, Australia, all have laws against the contract cheating industry. We do not in America, and we do not have much attention paid to it either by accrediting agencies or by the institutions themselves. So that stuff's all going on. Now, cognitive offloading doesn't have to mean cheating, right? It becomes cheating when it undermines learning objectives. So if I use a Google Translate for, you know, maybe a sentence in my chemistry lab report, but maybe that's not cheating. But if I use it in my language class to write my paper in English, and then I translate it to Japanese for my Japanese language class, and I hand it in as if as if I wrote it in Japanese, that would be cheating, right? Because the point was to learn how to communicate in Japanese. So it has to be connected to the learning objectives. You know, if it gives a dishonest impression of knowledge and ability. So I can use somebody else's words and ideas as long as I cite them, because that's transparent, right? But if I pretend that those words or ideas are mine, then we consider that to be plagiarism or cheating, not cognitively offloading. And so that's something to think about for ChatGPT as well, is when can we have students use it transparently? And so it wouldn't be an academic dishonesty problem in that sense. And of course, if it violates the rules for that particular class or assignment, and hopefully that's connected back to the learning objectives. This is why rules need to differ between classes. I've seen a lot on social media about, oh, the universities or the colleges need to make a blanket policy so that it's not up to the individual faculty. It's no, because it depends on the learning objectives. In one class where something might be okay, in another class, it might not be. And we should be okay with that. So my point is we need to change, right? And as I mentioned earlier, people were still teaching as if it was the 20th century in 2008. And back then I asked, how can we best assure students are learning? Now I ask, how can we best facilitate and assess learning given these new realities? Given that we want our certifications to still have value, which means that students have the knowledge and skills that those certifications represent. So how do we do this? This is where generative AI presents us with the possibility to realign our values to positively impact student success. So let's think, we use the word excellence a lot, right? Diana, this is in the Middle States Commission as well, that excellence, it's everywhere. Institutions use it. We value excellence. What the heck does that mean? I always say. And what it means, I think, is that we have degree integrity, that everything we do is about ensuring that we're teaching and learning as we promise, and that we are certifying as we promise, that we have congruency between what we say and what we do. right? And we are constantly achieving for the best output. And it means that we are assured, like I said earlier, that we have graduates who have the knowledge and skills that our certifications convey, because only then can they be truly successful. People aren't going to be successful if they have a degree, if they cheated their way to that degree. If they contracted out with someone to do all of their, or even the majority of their assessments for them, which happens, it's a false sense of success. I've got a degree, but it means absolutely nothing. So we have to be able to, if we really want our students to be successful, we have to pay attention to excellence in terms of degree integrity and how Gen AI can help us do that and how it might hurt us in doing that. So what are the opportunities then? How can we use Gen AI to empower teaching, learning, and assessment with integrity? I've broken this down for opportunities for learners, institutions, and faculty institutions, and even accreditation agencies, both the opportunities and the barriers. So opportunities for learners. They can offload skills not being assessed, right? We can free up our brains from things that aren't being assessed. So if writing is not being assessed in a particular class, then maybe the student could offload their writing to that. Or if learning how to summarize journal articles is not being assessed, then maybe they can offload that. So it could free them up to do more interesting things, more deep learning, maybe things higher on Bloom's taxonomy of learning rather than memorizing or recalling. It could give them instant feedback. One of the problems with our institutions today is that our students live in a 24/7 world and we live in an 8 to 5 or maybe 8 to 8 world. Humans, faculty and TAs or whoever cannot provide instant feedback, but machines can. And instant feedback can be really great for things like mastery-based assessments, where students can get real-time feedback on, am I mastering these concepts? Do I need to study more? Do I need to revisit that book? Do I need to revisit the lecture? Do I need to interact with the chatbot to quiz me before I do the mastery-based assessment again? It could really individualize assessments. Now, this can get a little creepy because it requires a lot of information about the students. And so, privacy is something that we always want to be thinking about, or just the ethics of some of these things, of what has to happen behind the scenes to make these things come true. But technically, with enough data, with enough big data, we could individualize assessments for students. Certainly, students actually on their own could create their own study buddy. I was talking with my chat GPT the other day on the phone app and said, hey, I'm going to call you Angela and I want you to be my study buddy. And so Angela said, sure, what would you like to study today? And I had one of the students that I was doing a presentation for give some medical term that I don't remember. And she said, great, yeah, we can talk about that. Would you like to talk about how it does this or how it does that or what dimension of that? And because I prompted the ChatGPT to be a study buddy, they immediately stopped giving answers and started just asking questions back, which was phenomenal. Then a day later, when I went back on ChatGPT for a totally different thing, on my computer, not on my phone, I said, hey, can you help me with such and such? And she said, or it said, sorry, see? It said something about, now remembers our previous conversations, so it knew that it was Angela. Fascinating, creepy, but kind of could be really helpful as a study buddy, also providing practice material. Students can ask it to create quizzes based on a concept for the student, and they can do practice problems, they could do practice questions, and of course, 24/7 help. And so that is fascinating. I want to play this video because it is one of the possibilities, but one of the creepiest, I think, possibilities.
They need to excel. Now, this isn't a far-off future. In fact, it's happening right now thanks to explainable AI or XAI. Let's consider the case of an AI tutor in action, a system we'll refer to as AI tutor. This isn't just a futuristic concept, but an active participant in many classrooms today. AI tutor utilizes advanced machine learning algorithms, a subset of artificial intelligence, to understand each student's unique learning style. It's like having a private tutor for every student in the class, one that's always ready and able to adapt to each student's individual needs. AI Tutor can identify a student's strengths, helping to build confidence and promote mastery of a subject. At the same time, it's also keenly aware of areas where a student may struggle, and it tailors its approach accordingly to bolster understanding in these areas. But how does AI Tutor know when to push and when to pull back? This is where explainable AI, or XAI, comes into play. XAI allows the AI tutor to make its decision-making process transparent. This
Oops, sorry. All I did was hit chat and
isn't
it
a black
stopped.
box scenario where we feed in data and hope for the best. Instead, XAI provides a clear line of sight into how AI Tutor is making decisions and adapting its teaching methods. This transparency allows
So I didn't want to keep going with the commercial for that, but one, I thought it was creepy because it definitely seemed like it was AI voicing the voiceover. And when you think about this tutor that's constantly there all the time, always on for that student in every class, it has to know a lot about the student. So I was watching another ad the other day where it said basically, or I was listening to a podcast, and the amount of information that we'd have to feed, or the student would have to agree to feed into this machine to have it truly work at that level is beyond anything we're sharing now. And we're sharing way more than we already think, right, through our phones and our social media accounts. So just something to consider. So those are some opportunities for learners. I do think the 24/7 thing, though, 24/7 availability, though, is key. And for us at the institutional level, too, to really serve our students. So what are some opportunities for teachers? Well, we can use these tools to help us redesign our courses. Most teachers, unfortunately, were not taught how to teach in their before they became teachers, or even once they became teachers at the higher education level. And but ChatGPT can be a very good, or any Gen AI tool can be a very good partner for that. I can give it my course and say, how would you redesign this to make it more engaging? And you give it context, right? You say it's a course for first year students in a Research One university. There's about 400 in the class. The classroom is lecture style. And you could give it all that situational context that you would need to think of in terms of redesigning your course, and see what ideas the chatbot gives you. And the best way to do that is with some what we call chain of thought prompting. And so you have to be very, very clear. The clearer you are in your prompts, the better the output will be. So step one, I want you to do this. And then, so step one, I'm going to give you my syllabus, and I'm going to give you some context for the class. And then I want you to give me some, and I want you to read that and then tell me when you're ready. Step two, you're going to ask me any questions that you have that would help you redesign this course. Step three, I want you to redesign it, given the context, to make it more engaging for students because they're not showing up to class, and I want them to show up to class. You'll do that, you'll give me your answer, and you'll explain your reasoning. Step five. So you want to constantly give it in that very specific instructions, and ask it to ask you questions back. And that way it won't just run off and do something that you didn't intend. You can do the same thing for rubric creation. Here's an assessment I have. I've created. Rubrics are pretty formulaic, right? If you weren't using a chatbot for it, you'd go to some template, or you'd use one that you've used before, and you would just kind of replace things. So those are the perfect types of things for chatbots to do, things that are a bit more routine. And you can ask it to revise your rubric up Bloom's taxonomy, right? So I want to move from remembering and understanding up to applying and creating, or you want it to change the level of what's a passing grade. So one thing we're saying, that if a chatbot output can get a C grade on one of your assessments, then you're going to want to change that rubric. You're going to want to move up what's required. It can help you generate questions for assignments, questions for exams. Talk about needing a question pool for an exam, so every student doesn't get the same question in Canvas or whatever LMS you use, ChatGPT can be helpful. Now, everything I'm telling you here, obviously you have to check the output. You have to validate it. You have to critique it because it lies. It says things that aren't true. But still, generate me 1,000 new questions on this topic. How long would that take you, right? So even if you get 50 good ones out of that 1,000, that's still going to save you time. Revise your learning outcomes. Again, taking them higher up Bloom's taxonomy, for example. Revise this assessment. Help me revise this assessment so it's not as easy or tempting for students to offload to you to do. I've done that a few times with ChatGPT. Generate activities, ideas for activities around a particular lesson plan. Provide entry-level feedback to students, not high-level feedback, but entry-level feedback. And maybe even help you free up your time so that you can have more high touch with your students. My ideal about the impact of Gen AI on empowering higher education is that it frees our teachers up from doing all the stuff in the background, right? Generating exam questions, generating assignments, printing exams, scanning exams, all that kind of stuff. Free the faculty and the teaching assistants and any of the instructional staff up from doing that stuff so they have more time to spend human to human. That's the ideal, right? And I do think that Gen AI is maybe going to even help us with universal design for learning. Everywhere across the United States, faculty are getting inundated with more and more requests for accommodations. And not just legally, but ethically, we want to serve all of our students, right? And the more universal design for learning helps us facilitate and create classroom environments for all students, regardless of abilities. And so then you are freed up from not having to do as much accommodation. So here's a chatbot that was specifically created for how to UDL your class. How can I say UDL-size your class, right? And so you give it some information. I teach this. There's this many students in the class. This is high structure. And this bot that is specifically trained on UDL principles, on these principles that are listed here, specifically designed on those principles to give you advice about how you can incorporate UDL into your class. And again, it might not be all perfect and it might not be all right, but it could give you a starting point. And the nice thing about narrowly trained bots like this one, which by the way, all of us can now create our own GPTs that are specifically trained. You could create one to be a tutor just for your classroom or to answer questions just about your syllabus, for example. So maybe you can cut down on all the emails you get that if students just read the syllabus, they can ask the chatbot instead. But these narrowly trained AIs are going to do less hallucinations because they've been specifically told only use this information to answer the questions, the information that you've given it. So these can be really helpful. So I'm excited about that possibility as well. Okay, what are the opportunities for institutions? This is where I get really excited because I think that teachers and learners can only do so much if the institutions aren't creating things, the infrastructure, the supportive environment, then it becomes difficult. So can we start to create program or competency-based level assessments instead of being so focused on courses and credit hours? This is a huge, huge shift, but even the Carnegie group is talking about getting rid of the Carnegie credit hour model. Even Carnegie is talking about, I just wanted to repeat that. Even Carnegie is talking about getting rid of this model, right? It could be high time that we're past this course level credit bearing hour assessment. Can we move more to program or competency based? And one of the reasons we're talking about that is because there are going to be some skills, some competencies that students need to learn without generative AI, without being able to use generative AI. Think about, we still teach students arithmetic, even though they can cognitively offload to calculator later, because that knowledge is seen as foundational knowledge that is needed to understand the math output that they're getting, whether from a statistical analysis program or from a calculator or from ChatGPT or whatever. And so to do that, we're going to need to secure assessments. And we probably don't want to secure every assessment. So could classes move more towards mastery-based stuff? And then there's touch points or benchmarks where there are program or competency-based level assessments that are secure. And of course, that's not really an opportunity for the institution as much as it is for an individual department or program, but institutions can open up that possibility by saying, we'd like to hear proposals for this. We'd like to support this. Obviously offering the 24/7 support. Again, our students are not doing their work between 8 and 8 Monday to Friday. They're doing it at, usually between 10 p.m. I asked a bunch of students this, and it's like 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. window is usually when they're doing their academic work. And we're not available. Our writing centers are not available. Our supplemental instruction centers are not available during that time. And so of course, they're going to turn to the internet and ChatGPT that are open. So we have to start thinking about how can we leverage this power of Gen AI to offer 24/7 targeted, legitimate support to our students, not kind of this free for all. We can't just use OpenAI's ChatGPT, right? We'd have to have something trained very carefully. I'm really excited now for interactive textbooks. Now, institutions don't make textbooks usually, but they can integrate them. And I know the publishers are already looking at making interactive textbooks. And what that means is students could actually talk to the textbook, ask questions about the content, ask questions about where they can find something on what page, ask questions to expand on a topic. That'd be super exciting. And it's part, I think, of the movement that some institutions have been doing to have that fee for students where you pay one fee and you get access to all your textbooks electronically, of course. So that could be part of that movement. We could use it to track student learning progress. Again, this requires a lot of data about our students, but you can imagine if, and I get uncomfortable talking about this, but you can imagine if this machine had information about every class that student was in, and it knows if the student wasn't in class because it has their cell phone, GPS, whatever. And after 3 times of a student not attending a class, the institution or the instructor could be like, hey, we're worried about you. Where have you been? Or we're just looking at the stuff they submit to the LMS. We could, basically, my point is we could go beyond. Right now, we track student learning progress by their GPAs, usually at the end of the term. And we assess whether they're making progress and do they have as many credits as we think they should by this time. We could go much deeper with that. Again, it gets into a lot of privacy areas, but it could be more deep and less superficial, I think, than our current ways of doing things are. As I mentioned earlier, we could free up our faculty to be teachers rather than administrators doing a whole bunch of administrative stuff that comes with teaching. And I mentioned mastery-based assessment earlier. Well, computer-based testing facilities, I think, are the future of assessment security going forward. University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign has pioneered this really, and in particular with a software that they've developed. And they and UC Berkeley in some of their research has found that these mastery-based assessments reduce equity gaps in STEM fields in particular, and increase integrity because they're secure and people aren't cheating on them. So having in-person secure assessments on a computer-based environment, not in the old-fashioned blue book, I think is something that institutions really need to think seriously about. Okay, so those are some ideas, opportunities for students or for learners, teachers, and institutions. So what's stopping us? What's stopping us from doing these things? Well, some barriers to change include within Gen AI themselves, the hallucinations. You can't trust what it's telling you. If we don't change our assessments and our curriculum, it absolutely undermines honest assessment. Your students are using this right now to pretend that they fulfilled some learning objectives that they did not fulfill because they had ChatGPT or whatever do the assessment for them. So it absolutely undermines our degree integrity without changes. They're super unethical. I mean, we say they stole stuff off the internet, right? They did not get permission to use any of the material that their machines were trained on. The environmental costs are huge. The amount of water and power that these server farms will need are astronomical and probably not sustainable with all the other climate issues we're currently experiencing. The labor issues, so, you know, they paid Kenyan workers $2 an hour to help train their systems. So we're being like, and again, forced, for lack of a better word, to use these machines because students are using them anyways. But there's a whole bunch of ethical issues with the creation of these machines. So I do think that's something that higher education institutions just can't ignore. I'm not saying we don't use them, but I'm saying we should openly admit to the ethical issues with those machines and talk about them and talk about how we can use them or how we can teach our students to think critically about their use of them and our own use of them. Barriers within higher education institutions themselves. I said this earlier, faculty have not been trained, or they're not given training, they're not given support or time to rethink pedagogy and assessments. Remember when this came out, and I couldn't believe on social media that people were just saying to faculty and teachers from K through 16, well, just rethink your assessments. You know, you shouldn't expect students not to cheat, just change all your assessments, as if it's that easy to do. And so we cannot expect, or we shouldn't expect our faculty to do this in their spare time without support or time or training. Think about all our contingent faculty that only get paid starting day one of class and stop getting paid the last day of class. We just, the unpaid labor, it shouldn't be acceptable. In general, most institutions don't focus on degree integrity. Like I said, most do not have an office like mine. Most do not really think too much about academic integrity or making sure that the degrees have integrity in terms of people, at least cheating's been kept to an acceptable level of corruption. And so that's a problem. And then we have this kind of segmented or absent of critical thinking about our curriculum. So critical thinking's been assumed. Well, we know our students are learning critical thinking, but we don't really know how because it's up to individual faculty in their individual classes. And we also have this complicated rhetoric. We talk about information literacy, digital literacy, AI literacy, ethical reasoning. And we probably need to come together and really think about, like, what is some common language that we can use to refer to people thinking critically about the information they're consuming, the way they use digital tools, the information and way they use artificial intelligence, and just the ways in which they think through ethical dilemmas and issues. So we need to do a better job on that as well. I already mentioned that the credit hour versus competency-based education, there's an unhelpful friction there. It won't be easy to switch from a Carnegie credit hour to a competency-based education. This is a huge change, and friction can be great for creating change, and it can also stop change. And then some barriers within accreditation is, I think accreditation systems need to rethink measures of success. Again, we've been using easy ones like graduation rates, time to degree, post-grad income. Not that post-grad income's easy to collect, but they are, you know, objective symbols, but they could be false, right? Just because someone graduated doesn't mean they learned anything. And then again, at core, historically, a lack of attention paid to degree and academic integrity from the accreditation industries or accreditation commissions as well. And you know, I've said it's interesting because technically our students, those of us in the higher education institutions, our students could cheat their way through their degree. All of our students could cheat their way through our degrees and we would still get accredited. There is nothing in the accreditation systems, and I'm not just picking on middle states here, and they already knew up front I was going to say this. None of the commissions have standards that really require institutions to pay attention to academic or / degree integrity. When integrity is mentioned, it's really more about overall, like, do you have coherence between what you say and what you do? And so we need to do a better job there. Okay, so what are our solutions for leveraging Gen AI despite all of these barriers? Our first solution for learners is, well, you know, they got to learn. And so as institutions, we need to be putting out material to help students learn. Our library, for example, at UC San Diego has this great generative AI guide for students about when they should use it, when they not, and they collaborated with me to make sure it was always talked about ethics. We have a whole section on our website. We did these posters around campus, and we've had over 4,400, I think, students respond to it at this point. And then it takes them to the answer, which is sometimes. And so the good news is the majority of our students got that answer right, and they chose sometimes versus yes, always, or no, never. So our first step is educating our students. The first step for instructors, you have to play with the tools. What we see, about 26% in this audience alone have not played with the tools yet. Unfortunately, the only way you can learn about the impact that tool will have on your class is to play with it. Play with revising your learning outcomes. Play with your assessments. Think about, if this assessment has to be one of learning where you have to grade and assess, or basically say you're assessing the student's competency versus can it be a facilitator for learning that assessment. Play with the tools. Unfortunately, you just have to communicate with your students about it. I see all the students who are reported for unethical use of Gen AI, and the biggest request they have is that their faculty just talk to them about it. And yes, if you say I'm banning it, then some people are going to do it anyways, but some people won't if you tell them why on this particular assessment they shouldn't use it. Again, tying it back to the learning objectives. Ask them what they think. Ask them what tools they've been using, how are they using it, whether they think it could be used ethically in this class or for a particular assessment. Take in their input and maybe make some decisions based on that and collaborate with them on that, because we're all trying to figure this out together. If you're going to ban it, secure it. And if you're allowing that, you need to teach them how to use it ethically. And one thing I would say for sure in terms of teaching them how to use it ethically is have them be transparent about their use. Every time they're allowed to use it, have them say what tool they used. Did they find it helpful? Did it help or hinder their learning? Would they use it differently next time? And in other words, increase their metacognition about their use. They're thinking about their thinking and using these tools and how they're going to interact with them. The most important thing here is that we help students think critically about how they're using it, so they're not just mindlessly offloading their learning and their thinking to these machines. And there might be others that you've thought of, and I'm sure we'll be sending out these slides afterwards. But I created a guide for faculty on how to craft your Gen AI and AI policy that you are welcome to go through yourself, and it might be helpful for you in your class. Okay, first step solutions for institutions, and I really mean first step. Like these are easy things that you could do the next time you teach, right? First step for solutions, you have to have a guiding coalition of administrators, faculty, and students. Lots of institutions have started this already. Thankfully, our university did as well, but some haven't yet. You have to start the conversation on your campus. You want to develop some guidelines for the community or principles of practice. Again, not necessarily rules, because for academics, that's going to be tied to the learning objectives. But for your staff, are your staff allowed to use it? How do they know they're allowed to use it? What are they allowed to use it for? Just some general principles to help people make their own decision, because you can't possibly cover all of the scenarios. And so you want to give people some ethical grounding points. Sorry, I'm missing my word there, for them to make those decisions on your own. Perhaps you could develop, this is not necessarily a first step, but develop your own narrowly trained GPT. We're doing that at UC San Diego as well, called Triton GPT. And that way you're not worried about data privacy, because the data doesn't go out to OpenAI or whatever other company. Hire and appoint faculty and staff to be AI focused. I'm not talking here to those of you in the audience that are from Research One institutions. I'm not talking about faculty that do AI research, even though I guess that's the sexy thing, right? Because then you can make a big splash about how you've hired all these researchers. I'm talking about people who are going to help faculty and students learn and teach with AI. I'm talking about people that will help staff, faculty, and students figure out how to use these tools. People on the ground, practical people. And of course, I think you need to provide time, training, and support for faculty to redesign. The word redesign's missing there, but redesign their courses and assessments. Maybe that looks like you get a release from teaching this course this term in order to redesign this course. Maybe that looks like summer stipends. I don't know. That will depend institution to institution, but we do need to provide something. If you want to know more about our GPT here, you can look up Triton GPT. You can just Google it. First step solutions for accreditors, and then I'm almost done. The International Center for Academic Integrity has this instrument called AIRS, Academic Integrity Rating System, that can help institutions decide how well they're doing on academic integrity, whether they have the necessary infrastructure for degree integrity. And accreditors could easily say, hey, maybe you phase it in, but could easily say, hey, we want you to do this AIRS instrument, and we want you to tell us about your results and what you two to 5 things you plan to do over the next 5 years to increase your focus on academic integrity. Be a pretty easy thing to do. Sorry, that meant to show that earlier. And I think I said this already, we need to rethink how we might measure student success in the Gen AI era. This quote is probably not surprising, but shocking. And that seems to be one of my sayings these days. I'm not surprised, but I'm shocked. 3/4 of our graduates feel ill-prepared to launch their careers. I wonder how much of that is because despite having that certificate, they don't feel like they have the knowledge and skills necessary to get and keep a job or to go on to further educational opportunities. And yet our focus has been on that. Oh, they got the degree, they got the GPA. And our solutions aren't necessarily always based on learning science. They're logistical, financial, or Lean Six Sigma type solutions. I mean, if a student can graduate in 3 instead of 4 years, but they cheated to get there and therefore lacks knowledge and skills necessary to get and keep a job, are they really successful? So I think one big thing, and this is not an immediate step, but one big thing we need to all be thinking about is what are those durable skills, those human competencies that students who are human need to have when they graduate so they can compete against these artificial intelligence machines. And then how do we measure and validate their achievement? It's a lot harder, right? It's a lot harder, which is probably why we don't do a lot of these things directly. And so how can we begin to do this? This is a conversation. I don't have the answer. It's a conversation we need to be having on our campuses, within our systems, within our regions, and with our accreditation, maybe even with our accreditation agencies. And we have to foster human-to-human learning environments, right? We hear all the time, students aren't coming to lecture anymore. Why aren't they coming to lecture? They don't need to. Like I mentioned, they don't need to come to us for a delivery of knowledge information, and they haven't for a long time. They need to come to us for mentoring, coaching, guiding, active and engaged learning. How do we take our physical environments and turn them into what you see on the right instead of those large lecture halls that many of us are used to? And we need to more broadly rethink what we do and why. These are some really tough questions. Do we still need to teach writing, languages, computer coding? Computer science still seems to be one of the most popular disciplines. People are saying now maybe it'll actually be the humanists and the social scientists that companies are going to want to hire to interface with their computers, not computer programmers. What does original work look like when AI is so integrated into my system that I don't even have to go to ChatGPT to have it fix my writing? It's right there, and I'm co-writing with generative AI. How do we assess process over product? We've, again, relied on product too long, and product is a really defunct, inaccurate way of assessing people's knowledge and skills in many aspects, both because of cheating, but of other reasons too. So we used to, I mean, if you think back before the industrialization of higher education, we used to do more apprenticeship stuff. We used to do more cooperative education. We used to do more internships. We used to do more observations of people doing things and demonstrating their skills. Can we use Gen AI to give us more time to get back to that, even in our large institutions? How do we scaffold cognitive offloading? This gets back to assessing by program level or competency level versus class. That we teach students these foundational skills, and then we allow them to cognitively offload to Gen AI for the rest of the curriculum, because we have to teach them how to use Gen AI because employers are going to expect that. And then what do students need to learn to hold their value over machines? Because that's going to be a big thing. There's going to be a loss of jobs. There already is a loss of jobs. And so how do we need to equip our students to be more valuable than a machine? So the last big thought here is really thinking through assessments. How do we really think through when our assessments can be non-secure mastery-based assessments for learning, not of learning, and how we can use Gen AI to empower that versus when do we really need to do summative, secure assessments that allow us to say with some certainty, this graduate has the knowledge and skills at whatever level that we say they do. And that's going to be extremely important for us as higher education institutions to retain or maybe even regain some of the trust that we've lost in society and some of the devaluing people see in the university and college degree. So in summary, I think we must evolve how we define and measure excellence in student success. We must adapt how we teach and assess and accredit, because the integrity of our degrees and our relevancy to society depends on it. So thank you very much. I am going to turn it back over to Diana to talk about Q&A.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Trisha. All right, as a kind reminder, the questions can be submitted through the Q&A function on your Zoom toolbar. And we're gonna dive right in. So we had several questions come in. So one of the questions is, how do we access the UDL bot? The Universal Design for Learning bot.
Yeah, once you get my slides, there'll be a link in there.
Excellent.
Probably the easiest way to share it.
Excellent. Also, along the same lines, how or what software do you use to create your own AI for specific tasks?
I pretty much rely on ChatGPT 4. I pay for the paid version. I've played with Bing Chat. Bing Chat is great for when I want to know facts. Actually, I want to actually find stuff on the internet, but it's less engaging. It doesn't really interact with you like the paid version of ChatGPT does. I've tried also, of course, Google Gemini. It's the same kind of thing. It kind of depends on what you want. If you just want a clear, concise answer, then Bing Chat can be really, really great. And it's free, and it's GPT-4 as well. But Google Gemini is also less verbose. But if you want to have a conversation with it, if you want it to give you lots of content to work with, then I have found ChatGPT to be better. Pretty much the students that I've met with have only been using ChatGPT 3.5, the free one. And it's partly because it will write an entire paper, whereas Bing Chat, it defaults to, here's an outline that you could use for your paper. So that's both good and bad about how verbose ChatGPT can be. And plus, ChatGPT's got all those integrations with DALL-E 3, and so it's just kind of one environment where you don't have to go to other applications.
Thank you. So we have a FERPA question. So how do we navigate FERPA regulations and SIAM privacy when Gen AI essentially uses any content entered into it to generate future responses?
So you can, on most of the systems, elect to not have your input go into their training data set. So that is possible. And so that's one way you could handle it. The other way, of course, is de-identifying stuff that you put in there. The other way, of course, is don't be uploading your students' work to any of the free AI detectors that you are finding on the internet, and don't upload it to any of the AI chatbots without their permission. You just shouldn't do that. So that would be the first thing. And of course, if you are asking the chatbot for help in redesigning your course, you're going to keep that generic enough anyways. There shouldn't be any FERPA information in there. So I would say just remembering that when you are typing with any of these chatbots, pretend you're talking to a human and ask yourself, does it have an educational need to know this information? And if it doesn't, then you shouldn't be typing it. So that's how I kind of do it, is just, I think the same way if I was emailing a colleague and it's like, oh, do they need to know this? Nope, I shouldn't be sharing it.
Mm. So you touched on this before a little bit. So faculty training, right? So what resources and training will be needed for faculty to effectively integrate AI tools into their teaching and support student success?
Oh goodness, so much, right? I mean, again, most faculty were not trained in the basics of pedagogy. It's not, I mean, if I added a wish list on here, I would say, do you remember when we had that Preparing Future Faculty program in the States? I think it was in the 90s. And it was a really good program that PhD, universities could opt into to have their students be a part of that program. And I feel like it just kind of, it's either maybe still there and I never hear about it, or it went away. We don't want to force all people getting their master's or their PhDs to take teacher training, because some will not become teachers, right? But either the school where the person's getting their advanced degree or the institution that hires them, theoretically, we should be putting them in teacher training. It's frankly, I'm just going to be my Canadian self and just fully transparent here. And it's actually quite ridiculous. It fails the front page of the newspaper test. That I think if we said to most general public people, do you know college and university faculty are not trained how to teach? They'd be like, what? What are you talking about? It doesn't make any sense. And so, I've been using this opportunity of Gen AI, frankly, the panic around Gen AI, to educate faculty about course redesign, backwards design, right? And so they, honestly, most of them need the fundamentals of the fact that you need learning outcomes. You should start with learning outcomes, then move to activities that will facilitate the learning of those learning outcomes, then to assessments. And how do you design valid assessments? Do most of us even know that we have valid assessments? We probably don't. There's really a lot there. Starting point is twofold, I think. Leveraging the existing resources you have in your teaching and learning centers or what have you to create workshops, create opportunities for conversation. One thing I haven't done here yet that I'd like us to do is kind of almost like a hackathon, where it's just everybody get in a room and get on your computers, and we'll show you how to use these tools, right? Specifically around redesigning courses. And then I think the second part is paying them for that time. And the third part is train the trainers. So, reaching 2 or 3 or 5 or whatever number of faculty per school or per division or whatever you call it, train them and then have them, spread out and train. That would be the most probably economical way. And we know a lot of times the faculty learn maybe better or differently from other faculty than they might from other people, especially faculty in their own discipline. So those are just some ideas. But we have a lot of work to do in this area that has nothing to do with Gen AI, right? That existed before Gen AI came along.
Yeah, thank you. So from the integrity perspective, are there any specific resources you can pinpoint for higher education leaders about Gen AI? Sources for higher ed leaders.
Specifically around Gen AI and academic integrity? No, in the sense of, well, I'm not sure exactly what they're getting at. Maybe, I don't know if they can clarify their question. But
okay. So maybe like Gen AI detector for academic integrity. Do you have resources?
Yes, I did not talk really about detectors at all. Academic integrity starts way before the detectors. And I would caution any institution to, depending on technology, to solve the cheating problem. The solutions to academic integrity, preventing academic integrity violations is doing all the redesigning courses that we talked about. So choosing and making sure some assessments are secure. And then detecting when cheating is occurring so it can be handled appropriately so it doesn't become normative, right? One of the reasons students cheat, one of the most powerful reasons, is they perceive or know that their peers are cheating. And so we have to keep control of it, otherwise it will get out of control. And as you might have sensed from my presentation, I don't avoid hyperbolic language because I think it's sometimes really helpful to wake people up. If we ignore the cheating problem, we're all at risk for becoming diploma mills, essentially, right? So there's a whole bunch of stuff that would be a whole separate presentation on creating a culture of integrity and preventing academic integrity violations. So let me just skip to the elephant in the room, which is detection. Big debate about that. I am on the I hope we can get detection to work side, not just from an integrity perspective in academics or degrees, but from a democracy perspective, so that we have some indication of all the information and misinformation that's coming out. It'll help us identify that. It'll help us not get fooled by AI in terms of affecting our democracy. So I'm a big fan of hoping that there are some technological ways to help us with our critical thinking in terms of when AI is being used and when it's being used inappropriately. Not all tools are created equal. Any of the tools that your faculty might be using that are free and online that they can just access, they should not be using. They should not use it to decide a student has cheated because they're not always accurate, and they don't have, it's not like the similarity reports, say from Turnitin, right, where it's like this sentence came from this place. It's much more of an overview possibility. And so I think detection can be used as one almost like final solution or one final step, in that a professor's reading a paper and they think, this sounds, oh, there's that word delve again, or whatever. It sounds like the student didn't write it. There's all these indicators. I'm going to double check my assumption against this detector tool, but the institution should vet the tool, make it available to make the tool available, and it should only help inform the conversation. We would never accept a case, an allegation of an integrity violation based on a detection tool result alone. So it has to be part of a comprehensive overall approach, and it should never be thought of as the solution to the cheating problem. Unfortunately, we teach human beings, and so the cheating problem is complex, and there's never one magic bullet solution to ensure academic integrity.
Thank you. Excellent. So we have a question about the computer-based testing facilities, CBTF option. Talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah, and I'll make sure before I send you my PowerPoint to be sent out, I'll make sure there's some links in there to some references. I'm really excited about this. I'm just making myself a note to remember to put those links in there. I'm really excited about this, both from an integrity perspective and a learning perspective. We know that frequent mastery-based assessment is better for student learning than not. Faculty do not have time to do that if they have to do it in the classroom. And if they're not doing it in the classroom, they're doing it online through some LMS, and students are, I'm sorry, faking. A lot of students are faking their mastery by cheating on them, right? So they're not helpful. So even if they're assessments for learning and not of learning, like they're not worth any points. If students are cheating their way through them, they're not working as intended. They're not going to reduce equity gaps like the research shows that they can reduce, like the research shows they can do. And so what's the solution to that? The solution to that is that students come to the faculty member says, okay, this week, we are assessing your mastery level of this component of the course. You have all week to go to the testing center and take the test. You have multiple attempts during that week. You can take it as many times as you want. They come to that facility. Obviously, all of their stuff is taken, their phones, their smartwatches, all of that is put in a secure location. They sit down in front of a computer, they take their test, they get immediate feedback, and then they decide whether they're going to need to study some more and take it again later. So we've reduced equity gaps. Those centers are built to accommodate all students, whether they need reduced distraction or test alone rooms, or they don't need accommodations at all. So all the students are taking their tests within the same kind of environment. And they're able to do it repeatedly. And we had students who tell us that it actually reduces their test anxiety because they know what to expect every time they come to test, regardless of what class they're testing for. Versus before, you know, their physics professor does it one way, their math professor does it another way, so on and so forth. And so they just come in, we know their names, like we can say hi to them and see how they're doing. We get to know our students. And that provides a really nice as a testing environment, I think, can be. And it's secure to boot. And so I'm really excited by that potential. It's not cheap, you know, it's not free, but I bet you on your campus, you have a lot of labs that are not being currently utilized as much as they used to, because now a lot of students have their own devices, or perhaps the tutoring sessions are occurring virtually. But I bet on many institutions, you have physical labs that are sitting rather unused that could be easily transformed into computer-based testing facilities.
Alrighty, thank you. So just to reiterate, this presentation is being recorded and it's going to be made available within about 5 to 7 business days from today. So let's talk a little bit about student success. So how might AI redefine our understanding of student success? Are there any historic values we need to revisit as we move forward?
Yeah, I think our valuing of artifacts. I think our valuing of GPAs. I think our valuing of the credit hour. I think our valuing of time to degree. And I understand why we do all of those things. I get it. But we do all of those things not because they're best for student learning, right? We do them because they're financially better, they're logistically easier. We didn't have a choice. You know, they were the only things possible for us. And so I think we need to rethink those proxies, those artifacts of what we really valued. So those weren't really our values, but we just acted like it, right? And so we need to rethink what do those things represent that we actually value? And does Gen AI open up a way for us to actually measure those values more authentically and more directly? And so I think, though, unfortunately, that does get to a little bit of big data. I think that to truly measure student success, is a student learning? Are they progressing knowledge and ability wise at the I was going to say at the pace we expect, but again, that's a credit hour based question rather than a competency based question. It doesn't matter how fast they do it at their own pace. And I mean, there's probably limits, like, okay, they're taking too long, we need to provide them more support, right? But even the way we ask the questions, you can see how they're filled with our other considerations that aren't really about core values. Now, having said that, we live in our world of higher education is very expensive. And it would have been easy to say, even though we didn't do it in the 90s either, it would have been easy to say, let's just let the students take as long as they want to reach that competency, because it was pretty cheap. Back when I did my undergrad, it was not that expensive. And, you know, but we can't afford to have students. They can't afford to be with us forever, and we can't afford to have them with us forever. And so I'm not saying the financial considerations shouldn't be taken into account. They definitely should. But maybe they shouldn't always take the priority, right? Maybe we should be thinking about how can we use Gen AI to help students progress and measure their progress with more direct indicators like oh, well, they're taking this mastery-based assessment and now they've demonstrated their mastery, so we can progress them on to the next level. Or, wow, they've tried this 3 times and they're still not getting it. Let's shoot them some personalized, individualized tutoring or some help through the Gen AI bot. Again, it requires us to give the bot a lot of data. So you'd want it probably to be an internal bot and not a bot that gets fed out into the world. But I think those are really difficult questions that we need to start asking ourselves and answering as a group. I mean, I don't have the answers, right? I'm just the person who poses a lot of questions to help people think it through. But I really, when I'm not cynical about generative AI, when I'm being optimistic, this is a place where that optimism is coming from, is will it help us? Can we get it to help us get more to the heart of learning and measuring learning more directly?
Yeah, absolutely. So critical thinking. How can we leverage AI capabilities to complement student critical thinking skills and then also open new avenues for critical thought exploration?
Yeah. Well, I think those are great questions. I think that we can, with specially trained bots, we can really, like my Angela, my study buddy, we can really create, we can help probe students with critical thinking. Now, they can always not use our bot and choose to go to another tool that doesn't make them critically think. Absolutely. But most students, students are human beings. Just thought I'd remind us all of that. And most human beings, I think all human beings, are born to learn, right? We are born, we don't know how to do a lot of things, and we loved learning as children. And I think that innate love of learning is still there for the majority of people. It's just there's a lot of external pressures to not focus on learning, but to focus on other things. And so anything we can do to rekindle that intrinsic motivation for learning that I think is in every single one of us. And an individualized tutoring study bot like that could really help students' critical thinking. So say, picture this, the student goes to the bot and says, oh my God, the professor just asked this question. What is 2 + 2? And I can't even, right? Like, just what's the answer? And the bot could just respond and say, oh, well, let's think about it. You know the answer to that. I'm pretty sure you know the answer to this. What's stopping you from coming up with the answer? Right. So it can asking those questions back can make a student or facilitate critical thinking for a student. So that's the ideal place. But now with what you have available as a teacher, you can, one great exercise is to have a chatbot generate a response to one of your assessment prompts, hopefully one that you've already changed or you're willing to change. Give it to the students, or maybe have them generate it, depends. Give it to the students, give them the assessment rubric, and ask them to critically evaluate the output of the chatbot. That little exercise alone will teach them that they shouldn't just take the output at face value, and they need to critically think about everything that it spits out, because it makes stuff up, it's wrong all the time. And so giving them little critical thinking exercises right now with the bot access that you have can go a long way. And then again, helping students, I have another tool that I could send out, helping students go through your particular syllabus and assessments and think, when would it be ethical to use Gen AI on this particular assessment, and how could I use it ethically to help them just critically think through those things?
Awesome, thank you. So we only have time for one more question, and I think this is a little bit of a follow-up to the current one. So I have a question from the audience about suggestions or guides or links for using AI to help students with individual learning needs due to disabilities. Do you happen to have something?
I mean, there's so much, there's so much out there. I mean, I don't think really for most case you need a specialized tool. If we teach students how to just make the chatbot into their Angela and handle their individualized needs, and that can work. I mean, there's not going to be a free tool that's really good at this point. Any tool is going to cost money if it's any good. And I don't even think there's that many great tools out there that can that can do that at the level most would want. I'm not, I think I'd need a bit more clarity on the question, but I would be hesitant to just throw out, yeah, use this without knowing more details.
Excellent. This is all the time we had for questions. So thank you so much, Trisha, for your presentation. I learned so much, and I'm sure our audience learned so much as well. So just a couple of announcements before we adjourn. Our 2024 annual conference dates are December 11th through 13th in Philadelphia. And we're going to be again at the Downtown Marriott. We are planning an exciting 3 days. We will have plenary speakers, numerous concurrent sessions, a CEO luncheon, and breakfast speakers. Our ever popular student poster session proposals will be open on August 1st. And please encourage your student research scholars to submit a proposal. You can find more information about our conference at www.msche.org/annual conference. And check back to our website often as we continue to add upcoming conference information. And we hope to see you all in December. And then please take advantage of the opportunity to keep up with the latest MSCHE news and updates. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn and subscribe to our YouTube channel for webinar recordings, not just this one, but more, and helpful explanatory videos. Again, thank you all so much for joining us today. It was our pleasure to host this event, and we want to express our sincere gratitude to Dr. Trisha Bertram-Gallant for sharing her expertise. I hope you enjoy your event today. We have one remaining spring webinar, a conversation with the American Council on Education, which will take place from 1 to 2:30 p.m. on May 21st. You can sign up through msche.org/events. Registration is open and free to participants, so sign up today. On behalf of Trisha, myself, and the Commission, we thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.